Welcome to this session on concept and theories of social structure. Well, you've often heard the word and often used the word structure also in several senses. In this session, I will begin with the whole concept of structure as such, as it is used in general common parlance. From there we will move on to the concept of structure as it is used in the discipline of sociology, and then we will go on to exploring or understanding what social structure is, which is actually the subject matter of sociology. We will examine how Radcliffe Brown, how Edmund Leach, Evans Pritchard and Levi Strauss discuss this concept of social structure. Okay. Now before we move on to all these deep theories on social structure propounded by very great sociologists, let's start with the whole concept of structure or the meaning of the term structure. Well, the term structure itself comes from the Latin word structura, which was used in the sense of construction. In fact, the term structure was first used in the context of construction. In common parlance, the term structure is used to refer to, say, the way something is organized or it is built together or put together. Now, what is the example that comes to the mind? The first example that comes to the mind is the structure of human body, okay, in which different parts are put together, they are organized in the form of a very distinct, concrete, tangible structure. The other sense in which the term structure is used is in the sense of referring to a particular system, a particular pattern, a procedure or an institution. And what is the example that comes to the mind? The examples that come to the mind are, say, those of salary structure, okay, or say the class structure, caste structure. Because you see a pattern, a way of functioning, a procedure. Okay. The third sense in which the term structure is used, it is used in the sense of referring to something that is made up of several parts that are put together in a particular way. And the example that comes to mind is, say, a single-storied building or even a multi-storied building in which different stories combined to form a structure. Okay. Now, it's very difficult, I can understand, to distinguish between these three senses in which I have just said the term structure is used in common parlance. Okay. But there is a very slight distinction, and surely these three senses very well overlap with each other. Okay. Now, having understood the meaning of the term structure as such, let us explore. Let's take a step further and try and understand how sociologists use the term structure. And let us also find out whether it is any different from the way the term structure is used in common parlance. Now, sociologists use the term structure to refer to the way in which the different parts of an entity are interconnected so that the entity emerges as an integrated whole. Okay? And this entity which emerges as an integrated whole is divisible. It can be divided into its constituent parts. Okay? Now, having accepted this, what are the main features that come out of this? The main features that come out of this are interconnections, togetherness, a sense of wholeness, a sense of boundary maintenance mechanisms, right? These are the points that come to the mind, no? We may go on to explain this concept of structure that is used in sociology with the help of two analogies. Okay? Analogy is the whole What does analogy mean before we proceed? Analogy is when we say this A is like B. When we establish a relationship like this, we say we are talking of analogical relationship, or we are talking of analogy. Okay. Now I can explain this concept of structure used in sociology through two analogies. These two analogies were proposed by Sir Herbert Spencer. Okay. Herbert Spencer, incidentally, was also the person who used the term social structure for the first time. Now let's see how he explained this concept of social structure and what are the analogies that he used to explain this concept of social structure. The first analogy that he used was that of a house. Can you imagine the structure of a house is used to explain social structure? Well, it's possible. Let's see how. You see, a house is composed of what? It's composed of several rooms in which different activities are performed. So we have a bedroom. Okay, we have a bedroom in which there is a bed and it's used for sleeping. Maybe there is other furniture also, but the major purpose to which that particular room, which we call the bedroom, is used is for sleeping and for resting. Okay. Similarly, we can have say a study room, okay, where there could be a table, there could be a computer, there could be a bookshelf and other furniture and items that would facilitate reading, or where study is facilitated or promoted, right? And we call it the study room. There may also similarly be another room in which, say, the deities are kept, okay, and we call it the worship room, right? These rooms could be interconnected with each other through, say, galleries or verandas, right? And how are these rooms connected to the galleries and the verandas and to the outside world? Well, it's through doors, it's through windows, and it's through the ventilators, right? Now, just imagine if you are to close the ventilator, the window, and the room, and the door. What happens? The room emerges as an isolated entity, yet we know that it is a part of the whole house. It is autonomous. When we close the rooms and when we close the outlets, it's an autonomous entity. But even then, it is an entity which is part of a larger entity called the house. Similarly, the house is connected with the outside world through the doors and the windows and the ventilators and everything. Okay? So a house also exists as an individual, separate, autonomous entity and also as a part of the larger world. It could be a village, it could be a rural, an urban area. Okay? Now, but surely the house may not be an isolated entity. Similarly, just take a step further. What are villages? Villages are aggregates of houses, and each village maintains its uniqueness and its distinctiveness, yet it has connections with the other villages and with other spaces. So, when we say that the house, the social structure can be compared or is analogous to a house, what are the factors that emerge? The factors that emerge are that it can be treated as an isolated entity at one level, but when you look at it from a broader perspective, it is part of a larger whole. This same point comes out very clearly in the second analogy which was proposed by Sir Herbert Spencer, and which formed the basis of a whole school of thought later, which was called the functionalist school, or the structural functionalist schools, of which Radcliffe Brown was the chief scholar. Of course, Malinowski, Durkheim, Parsons, Merton, and several others. Now, what is this analogy of the organism? Well, Herbert Spencer said that society is like an organism, and organism is like a society. Now, how is it possible? How can society be like an organism? Well, it can be like an organism because the principle or the main unit of a organism is the cell. Okay? What do we mean by the basic unit? I just said the basic unit of an organism is the cell. What is meant by this phrase basic unit? Well, the term basic unit means, the phrase basic unit means that beyond, or the cell is the indivisible unit. Further, it cannot be broken down. Okay? A cell is the smallest unit through which, a congregation of which gives rise to the organism. And I'll tell you how. Cells combine to form tissues. Tissues combine to form organs. Organs combine to form the organism. And similarly, the process is reversible, which means you can say that an organism is made up of organs. Organs are made up of tissues. Tissues are made up of cells. Similarly, if you accept this, if you understand this, then when I say that society is like an organism and organism is like a society, one tends to think, well, in an organism, the basic indivisible unit is the cell. Okay? What is the basic indivisible unit of society? What could it be? It could be the person. Okay. Now, this analogy was explained a great deal and in tremendous detail by an anthropologist called Radcliffe Brown, who said that the principle or the basic unit of society is the socialized individual. Socialized individual. Now, what does this term socialized individual mean? Are we socialized individuals? Yes, because a socialized individual is one who has internalized, who has accepted, and in whom it runs what? The norms, the values, the beliefs, and the way of meaningful social behavior. Right? Someone who has internalized this is a socialized individual, and a socialized individual is the basic unit of society. Okay? Socialized individuals combine to form groups. Right? Groups combine to form communities. Communities combine to form society. And the reverse also. So, but you must also understand that I have said society is like an organism. I did not say that society is organism. If I say society is organism, then I am talking of homology. Okay? While I just said that we were talking of analogical relationship. Analogical relationship is one in which, as I said earlier, we say that A is like B, but A is not equal to B, certainly not equal to B. When I say A is B, then it is homology. When I say that society is like an organism is like a society, it means that they are like each other. There is a distinction also between the two. And what is the distinction? The distinction is that a single cell can constitute an organism. We know amoeba is a single cell organism, right? But a single socialized individual cannot constitute society, right? That's a basic difference. Aristotle at one time had said that individual cannot stay alone. An individual who can stay alone is either a beast or God, right? The basic unit is then a dyad in a society. At least there must be at least two individuals, right? Single individuals cannot survive, cannot exist. Okay. Now, surely then the next question that comes is, there are two critical questions. The first critical question is, what is the basic unit that may be understood as part that makes the structure? Is it the individual or is it the group? And is social structure an empirical reality? Can it be observed? Can it be understood by the same means as are used in natural sciences and biological sciences? Well, they say Radcliffe Brown, about whom I was just talking, said that social phenomena can be investigated by methods that are similar to those methods that are used in natural and biological sciences. You see, when Radcliffe Brown was propounding his theories of social structure and of society in a general sense, that was the age in which science, reason were the guiding principles. Right? It was an age of reason, age of science. Right? So Radcliffe Brown and Auguste Comte, as you know and you've heard earlier and probably read also, was the father of sociology. Auguste Comte was someone who propounded the concept of positivism, and he said that the methods of social science can be used profitably, appropriately to understand sociology. Right? Of course, there are a lot of distinctions, lot of differences between, say, the sciences and social sciences in a general sense and sociology in a particular sense. Right? But that was the age of, as they say, positivism. Anyway, in that age of positivism, Radcliffe Brown said that it was possible to study social phenomena by the same methods as are used by the natural and the biological sciences. Now, this has at least two or three implications. Right? The first is that the subject matter is empirical. It is subjected to observation, right? Because in scientific methods, the method is empirical and the subject matter is empirical. You can see it and you can observe it. So if we apply the same methods to social phenomena, it also implies that the principles of science are also applicable, which means that the subject matter of sociology should also be empirical and subject to observation. This is the first implication. The second implication is that it is possible to systematically investigate the structure of the universe or the structure of society, just as we can observe the structure of, say, atoms in physics and molecules in chemistry. The third implication is that just as in natural and biological sciences, we should be able to, sociologists should be able to arrive at general laws of society. After all, in the sciences, they do have general laws. You have Newton's law of motion, you have the law of gravity, you have Heisenberg's principle, and several others. When we accept that in sociology we use the same methods and the same principles apply, so then we must also accept that we should be able to put forth general laws of society. Now, having accepted this, Radcliffe Brown says social structures are just as real as are individual organisms. Okay. Then Radcliffe Brown creates a distinction or draws a distinction between the individual and the person, and he says that the basic unit is the person and not the individual. Now what is the distinction that Radcliffe Brown creates or draws between the individual and the person? We often use these terms synonymously with each other. Well, Radcliffe Brown said that an individual is determined or refers to the individual in his or her biological sense. Okay, so one can is a male or a female, and that's it. An individual is a male or a female. A person, on the other hand, is a complex of social relationships, which means that he or she is a member of, say, the family. So there is a whole complex of relationships that are involved. The person is a member of, is a citizen of the country. The member is, say, a worker in an organization. It could be a factory, it could be a university, it could be a school, or anywhere. So the same individual, which means that each individual is placed in a complex web of relationships. And when this happens, that we say that it is not an individual, it is a person. Right? When we talk of a person, we say then that a person, each person occupies a place in the social structure. Right? Now, Radcliffe Brown uses the term social personality to refer to the place of an individual, of a person in the social structure. Right? This is the concept of social personality in the context of social structure used by Radcliffe Brown. We just said that social structure is a part of, a person is a part of social structure, which means then what is social structure and what is society? Does a collection of persons constitute social structure or society, or is social structure and society something entirely different? We know that the constituents of social structure is are persons, but just a collection of persons make a society? No, certainly not. A society is not a haphazard collection of persons. Rather, it is an ordered or organized system in which the norms, the values, the beliefs, the past events control relationships between persons. Radcliffe Brown includes at least two aspects in the framework of social structure. First, he says that all social, the first aspect that he refers to are the social relations of a person with other persons. Okay, so if we think of, if we work out what are the major relationships of which an individual, of which a person is a part, kinship structure for instance. So one includes here the position and the relationship of one person with the other in a kinship webwork. The other aspect of social structure that he talks about, that Radcliffe Brown talks about, is the differentiation of individual and of classes according to their social roles. Okay. Radcliffe Brown says that social structure is that concrete reality that comprises the set of actually existing relations at a given moment of time which link together certain human beings. Naturally, the thrust is on interrelationships, on linkages. And he says that it is possible to conduct direct observation on social structure. How? One can observe social relationships and the operation of social relationships in practice. Right? Radcliffe Brown also makes a distinction between social structure and structural form. The distinction is, he says that social structure continues over time. Okay, it's a complex webwork of relationship between and among persons in different contexts. So these relationships, he says, continue over time. This is what he meant by, this is what he referred to as dynamic continuity. Now, from these relationships, Radcliffe Brown said, it is possible to make abstractions. You understand? From the actual functioning operationalization of social relationships, it is possible to draw out abstractions or generalizations. And these abstractions or generalizations, Radcliffe Brown referred to as the structural form. Okay. So we go on to a reworking of Radcliffe Brown, and we say that he proposed that social structure is a reality, which means it is observable, it is empirical, it is subject to the same techniques of observation as the natural and biological sciences, and he said that each branch of science deals with a certain kind or class of structure, and then he seeks to discover the characteristics of all the structures of that kind. And all structures of a particular kind are compared to arrive at their common characteristics. Now, what is the whole purpose of comparing these structures? The last point says that all structures of a particular kind are compared to arrive at their common understanding, common characteristics, because the whole purpose of all this is to arrive at the general laws of society, to arrive at generalizations that are applicable across cultures, across societies. Right? That was what I said is the basic aim or the objective of the positivist approach and of the functionalists. Now, this was one viewpoint of social structure where there was a lot of emphasis on empiricism, on direct observation, on social relationships between persons. But there is also another viewpoint. The other viewpoint is that social structure refers to relations between groups. And this is what was proposed by Evans Pritchard. Okay? Evans Pritchard said that instead of identifying a person as the basic unit of society, you see, before we go on to even this, I may mention that Evans Pritchard conducted his fieldwork, or his study was based on an in-depth research on the Nuer. Okay? Nuer is a community which herded cattle, and there were very strong territorial groups. Against that background, and having studied the Nuer very closely, Evans Pritchard said that instead of identifying persons as the basic unit of social structure, as was done by Radcliffe Brown, it was appropriate to view social structure in terms of groups, which means that the basic unit of analysis is not the person but the group. Okay. Evans Pritchard says that by social structure, then we mean relations between groups and which have a degree of consistency and constancy. Okay. Now, what is important here? It's important to note 2 points. One is that the emphasis shifts from person to group, and the group should be consistent and constant. It is for this reason that Evans Pritchard said family should not be treated as a structural group. Why? Because it has a lifespan. Individuals are born, a family may become extinct also. So then, say a clan can be considered as a group. Structure then becomes an organized combination of groups. Individuals come and go, but the group continues. And he said that processes of life and death condition the individual, but certainly not the structure. Okay? It is often said that what Radcliffe Brown referred to as the structural form was something that was referred to by Evans Pritchard as social structure. Now, Evans Pritchard, we said the focus was on groups and not individuals, and groups that would have consistency and constancy of a kind, and therefore he said that social structure is not an empirical reality. Now, having done this, we say that a group is, what exactly then is a group? We said what is not a group. Okay, we said family is not a structural group. It's not a structural group because it doesn't have consistency, it doesn't have constancy. What then is a group? A group, according to Evans Pritchard, is a congregation or a collection of people who consider themselves as distinct, as a defined, definite unit in relation to other units. Does the analogy of the house now come to your mind again, where we said that each room is distinct, has an entity of its own, and yet it is part of the larger house, and a house is a part of, say, the neighborhood. Okay? So we say that a group is a congregation of individuals, congregation of people which have a sense of distinction and which have a sense of togetherness, oneness, identity. Okay? And they are so defined by other groups. So group A is defined, people in group A consider themselves to be one unit, that's all right. But people of group B consider themselves distinct from A and identify A as a group. In essence then, social structure does not remain an empirical reality. Right? This same idea of social structure not being an empirical reality was carried forward by Claude Lévi-Strauss, who went a few steps further. And he said that social structure is not an empirical reality, certainly, but social structure is a model. Now, I told you that Sir Herbert Spencer gave the analogy of the house and the organism to explain the concept of social structure. Okay? Lévi-Strauss used the analogy of language to explain social structure. How did he employ the analogy of language to explain social structure? Okay. He said that from a given piece of language, the linguist tries to derive the structure and the grammar of it, which the users of the language may not even know, but they use the language, right? Which means that, and we know, whatever language we speak, we may not know the grammar of it. We may just be able to speak correctly and write correctly. And when we ask each other, how do you know this is correct? We say, oh, we've grown up with it. We know it, right? So, but a linguist knows the grammar of it, knows what comes where, how, the whole logic of building the sentence and constructing a paragraph, right? The shift then, as you can see, is from organic analogy and behavior to the structure of the language. Now, Evans Pritchard said, social structure is like language. How? He said, the reason is that we accept that, say, a piece of music. A piece of music can be transformed in many different ways. You can sing it, it can be codified, written down, it can be rendered through the digital mode and through many other means. It is this idea of transformation from one way to another which lies at the core of structuralism, and Levi-Strauss is said to be the pioneer of structuralist school in anthropology. Now, structuralism then accepts that the set of relations between different parts can be transformed into something different from what it was earlier. And this example of the music that I just gave was actually proposed initially by Edmund Leach. Edmund Leach proposed this example of music to explain the basic premise of structuralism. Now let us see how Levi-Strauss looks at social structure. Well, Levi-Strauss says that social structure is an abstraction, it is a model, it is a method of study, but certainly not observable, not empirical, the way Radcliffe Brown had proposed. And he said that it is possible, and the main objective is to arrive at social structure of the entire human society. Remember, Radcliffe Brown was talking about social structure of different communities, of smaller groups. Radcliffe Brown talks about social structure of the entire human society. That's a fundamental difference between the two of them. Now, how is that possible? Can we arrive at the social structure of entire human society? Is it possible to do that? Well, Levi-Strauss said that the data or the data for social structure is provided by social relations and by social experience. So, from social experience and from social relations, one makes an abstraction. One tries to deduce a model. Now, obviously, there will be a different model for community A, there will be a different model for community B. But the objective is to compare, to integrate the two models and derive a common format or a common model for the understanding of human society. And that's what he referred to as the social structure. Now, here of course we say that social structure is not an empirical reality. This same viewpoint was carried forward was also taken up by Edmund Leach, and I told you that Edmund Leach gave the example of music to explain the principles of social structure. Now, and I will just compare in a minute the approach of Edmund Leach and the approach of Claude Lévi-Strauss. The two approaches are not very different. You see, Lévi-Strauss said that it is important to understand what people say and what people do. Okay? What people say constitutes mechanical model, what people do constitutes statistical model. Right? And he said that both of these are important to arrive at an understanding of society and to derive social structure. Edmund Leach accepted these, but he only changed the terminology. Instead of mechanical model, the term that he used was jural rights, and he talked about statistical norms. And he said that statistical norms are more important in understanding social structure, and that statistical models should be given more importance, should be looked at with greater depth than the jural ones. Well, we now, I hope, have arrived at a general understanding of what constitutes social structure, and in probably the next session, not the one following this but later, we could be talking about how social structure is maintained. Okay. So with this we conclude this session. Thank you for being there.